Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host. And for this episode, I wanted to talk about the lessons that I actually experienced living in the Tibetan Buddhist retreat center. So let's go inside of the retreat center and share some of my experiences, some of my learnings, and some of the things that I've been able to take from my time training in Tibetan Buddhist teachings into how all of this is informing my life nowadays. So one of the main things that I wanted to share is that for me, ever since I was introduced to Tibetan Buddhism, it wasn't as a religion. It was introduced as a perspective or a philosophy of life. And that was a little bit my approach to it ever since, because I saw it as something that made sense and something that I could experience and experiment for myself and validate the experience, and that was really helpful. And because I talked to a lot of people throughout the years about, Buddhism. For a lot of people, Buddhism is a religion. And for me, this is not how it is. For me, there's a difference between people that are religious and people that are following a tradition or a philosophy of life, or that are considered spiritual. For a lot of people, in my experience, a lot of people that consider themselves religious are a little bit more dogmatic in how they see that tradition. Nothing wrong, just different. So my approach has always been more open and not as dogmatic. Saying that, I immerse myself in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. As you can hear in other episodes, I started back in Argentina practicing Tibetan yoga and meditation. And then when I was living abroad, when I was living in Germany, I decided to go to the US to move into the Tibetan Buddhist Retreat Center from the teachings of Tartan Tulku, the Nyingma lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. So there's different schools within Tibetan Buddhism, or different traditions. One of them is the Nyingma, or ancient one. So that is the tradition that I mostly trained with. A lot of it has been focused on the practices of yoga and meditation. So a lot of it has actually been about how to reconnect with my body, to understand energy, how to shift energy, how to understand the blockages and trauma, and how to move those. So that has been a huge part of the foundation of my practice. And then at the same time, there were a lot of learnings from philosophy and psychology and history and different meditations. So it was a lot of different interesting things at the same time. Plus, and something that has been huge in my path, is the teachings of Skillful Means. So the teachings of Skillful Means are a lot of the practices that are based on the Prajna Paramita teachings, or in a sense are the teachings that Buddha suggested to people that weren't monks on how to reach enlightenment through everyday life. Because in India, at the time of Buddha, There were a lot of people that decided to be monks or ascetic people, and then there were people that had family life or work life, and a lot of them that wanted to remain in that wanted to also reach enlightenment or get greater understanding. So a lot of the teachings of Skillful Means are around how do we use our daily life and how do we use different aspects or different perfections, are called the paramitas, to be able to use our life circumstances, whether that is our relationships, our work, our internal life, as the vehicle for our development. And a lot of it, when I was living in the retreat center, was about how do we use the work that we're doing daily there to be able to be able to practice being more present, more aware, to be able to understand how we are concentrating, to understand our tendencies, to understand the moments that I might get bored or I might, lose concentration and get distracted. It's a lot about reflection. So those teachings have been huge for me as well. And beyond the understandings more intellectually that I learned a lot, it was about the actual experience of those. How to incorporate them in my life, how to feel into them, how to allow them to be part of my life, how to move them. I remember like one of the times that was huge for me was when I was we were making books. We used to make these Tibetan books that the organization gives away for the Tibetan community in the Himalayan region. So we were making these books and we had these old machines, um, and we used to operate them really fast. And one day I remember that one of the machines that I was using, it used to move at a very fast pace. Like I'm talking kind of like ta 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 ta. That would be the speed of it. And then I remember that one day I was working there, and suddenly instead of that being the rhythm or the speed, I could feel like it was like ta ta ta. I just thought, did someone just change the speed of the machine? But I just kept on working. I was just moving. I was able to do it so easily that I just thought, okay, someone turned down the speed, so I'm able to do this with a lot of ease. And it wasn't until we finished and I asked if someone had reduced or why they reduced the speed. And they said that they didn't, that it was going at the same speed as always. And not only I was surprised, in that moment, I realized what had happened. I was so present that I had actually expanded time and everything was going in slow motion. And because I kept on having that experience, I was able to realize it. I was able to realize that everything was moving so differently. I was able to do things that I didn't think that I could do before. I was able to have so much space, even in conversations with people, to process what they were telling me, feeling it so that I didn't have to react, and then being able to respond. And all of that in a moment. It's not that I was taking days to respond. That was huge because that not only gave me that understanding of how to, in a sense, manipulate time, it also allowed me to start to experience life very differently. The best way that I can describe this is that the amount of experiencing that I used to have in 1 year, suddenly I was having that in 1 day. Which meant that the days not only seemed so long, I could feel so much in each and every single day because it expanded so much. And that remained. I don't even remember now how it is. to experience so little as I used to. So that was huge. The other thing that was huge was living in nature for me. Living in the middle of the redwood forest. That was huge because that was the first time ever that I lived in nature. That allowed me to change my relationship to nature, to the trees, to the plants, to the animals. Because up until that moment, I didn't have that. So I was able to shift a lot of my understanding there, and that feeling that then allowed me to make a lot of decisions in then how I consume things, both in buying things, in my food, in what I'm putting into my body. That connection was pivotal for all of that. The teachings around compassion as well were huge because they gave me a lot of understanding on how that is important, both for compassion towards myself and compassion towards others. And that informs nowadays a lot of my life. And this isn't only from Buddhism, it's coming from systemic family constellations and from a lot of other traditions that I have studied. But in Buddhism is a big part of it, compassion, and being able to understand the experiences that we're going through so that then we can see people or circumstances differently. We don't take things personally. We're able to be with things very differently. We don't need to react as much. We just bring a different perspective to life and to situations. So this was another big thing. The I remember a lot of times with the Kumye practices or the Tibetan yoga practices, being able to practice one specific posture for 25 days, holding that for 25 minutes. That was huge. Of course, at the beginning, when I was doing for every single posture, the first day I wasn't able to hold it for 25 minutes, but eventually, yes. But that gave me so much understanding on what is happening internally. How does the energies flow in the different pathways in my body? What happens when I am, for example, just opening the arms and just holding them there? What's happening when I am bending my knees or bending forward? It gave me a lot of understanding on what is happening when I'm doing all of these different movements or postures. And working with my awareness, working with being present, working with the breath to be able to stay there and to move out of that. That has been huge. Because then I started to realize, okay, I don't need to only do that when I am practicing these postures. I can do this all of the time in my life. I can be sitting here and I'm able to feel everything that is happening now as I'm talking to you and I'm sitting and there's the sun hitting my face. I'm able to be with all of that. I expanded my awareness so much, and I'm sure that there's even more, but it was huge. And there's a lot of things that I remember specific things like the first time that I felt Tartantulku. He wasn't even nearby, and I started to feel him. I felt the weight of his presence. I have heard and read about this with people that have talked about their teachers or enlightened beings or highly realized beings. I felt that. I felt the weight of his presence. And that gave me an understanding as well on what is possible. Because as one of the things that I learned is that we are all, in one perspective, from the Buddhist perspective, we're all already enlightened. We are all with intrinsic Buddha nature. And we don't realize that. And when we see sometimes and experience those things that can give us more understanding of what's possible for ourselves. This is why Buddha is a reminder of what's possible for each of us, that we can actually get there. The other big thing was, and I remember this, one day we were exploring like the balance of being present, which is a lot of the practices were about being present, with the future. How do we not go towards the future and stay present, but also how do we allow ourselves to be aware that there might be a future? And this conversation started because we were talking about, well, like if I, for example, if I am just focusing on the present, I'm not going to focus on the fact that I need to have money to pay for things tomorrow or next week or in a month. I'm just here. This is all that exists. And my teacher told me, be present, don't be stupid. It was one of the best things that I heard, that I needed to hear, because it was about understanding that there might not be a future, but there might be a future. So bringing some balance into it, not living in the future as I used to when I was younger, all the time anxious about what's coming, being here and being able to be informed enough with the possibility of the future, but being here. And this ties a lot into one of the other main practices that really helped change me, which was working with death. Up until that moment, I had never worked with death. That wasn't something that I used to practice or part of my life. Um, as I have shared in another episode, when my grandfather passed away when I was a late teenager, I completely froze. I didn't know how to be with death. And when I started working with it, one of the main things that my teacher told me was, in working with death, we're inviting our awareness into something that is natural. It's a part of life, because one of the teachings in Buddhism is everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts in the same shape, in the same form. Buildings can be there for thousands of years or days, but they will still, go back to being nothing. Planets can be there, and perhaps billions of years later, they will go back to being part of the universe. We are born and then we die. So it's a natural part of life, but it's a part of life that I wasn't really aware enough about. And most importantly, he told me working with death or practicing around death was about practicing with life, about being aware of how precious life is. And that was huge. That was able to give me an understanding every single day, practicing that I was going to die that night. How can I make the most out of this day? And he used to tell me, it's not that you can go do nothing or be with your family because you know that you're going to die now. No, you're doing what you're doing, and then you're not going to wake up the next day. So how are you making the most of living life, this precious human life? That changed a lot my experience, that changed a lot my perspective, that changed a lot my relationships. Since then, I've been able to, every time that as an example, that I talked with my parents, I realize I don't know when it's going to be the last day for them or for me. So I tell them that I love them, something that I didn't used to tell them. I've been much more confident and wise in how I'm choosing to live my life and where I'm placing my energy and who I'm giving my energy to. So all of these things were really huge in giving me understandings. I haven't even gone into any of the other more esoteric teachings or things that were, in a sense, mind-blowing with what is possible. In some of my meditation practices, moving through objects and things like that and levitating, like there's so much that happened in those years in the retreat center and going deeper and deeper and deeper into the Tibetan Buddhist teaching because it's an amazing tradition. And I keep on practicing. That's one of the things that my teacher told me one day. Not focusing on reaching enlightenment, focusing on what can I do today to potentially get there. And he said it's the same practice whether we reach enlightenment or whether we die before. It doesn't matter. We practice being present, being more aware, releasing that which we are holding, taking out all of the veils that are preventing us from seeing the truth of who we are and truth of nature and truth of the universe. I think that this is, good enough to share. I would love to share more in other episodes. But if you're interested in something else, perhaps send a message. So just like always with all of the episodes, if you are interested in something specific, comment whatever it is that you're finding in this episode. Share your experience as well of change. If you had an experience like me that decided to leave everything behind and go into the middle of a mountain in a Tibetan Buddhist retreat center, it doesn't need to be in that same tradition, but if you have done something like this, I would love to know. So, as always, comment whatever it is that you're watching or listening to this episode. And thank you for being there, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.